local law to amend the administrative code of Nassau County in relation to the prohibition of discriminatory, anti-competitive business practices by companies that participate in boycott, divest, sanction activities.
Motion to open the hearing. Moved by legislator Capel, second by legislator Dunn. All those in favor of opening the hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is now open. I have several speakers that I'm going to ask that legislator Capel will introduce speakers.
Okay, I will do whatever. First of all, thank you all for those of you who are here for this item. Thank you for coming. We have a number of esteemed rabbis, local community rabbis, and students. I see that we have virtually the entire student body of the Rambam School. And Rambam, by the way, is an acronym. It's a Hebrew acronym for Maimonides, who was a philosopher and doctor of physician who lived about 1,000 years ago. It's very appropriate. Now, this legislation is intended to, you'll be happy to hear that I'm not going to go through my entire speech ability. Very simply, the legislation is intended to have the County of Nassau avoid dealing with any organization, with any business or any organization that refuses to deal with the State of Israel, or actively boycotts the State of Israel, and is a member of the BDS, the so-called BDS movement, which is at its heart an anti-Israel, not an anti-occupation movement, it's an anti-Israel movement. It's aimed at the destruction of the State of Israel, and it's an anti-Semitic movement. If you look at the leaders, and I'm sure we're going to hear from the speakers. The students here are going to get a little bit of a lesson in civics. I commend all of you, and especially the principal and the board for having brought you here today. You get to see a little bit of how the proverbial sausage gets made, and of course today it's kosher sausage. Well, imitation, we'll say. Yes, the presiding officer suggests quite correctly. Can we have all of you students, faculty members of Rambam, can you please just stand and show yourselves? Very gratifying. You can sit now. Thank you. And we're going to go to a number of speakers. First, we're going to call on Rabbi Bruce Ginsburg and his congregation, Sons of Israel in Woodmere. And would you come?
Thank you for inviting me.
Just press that red button, please. Just press that red button.
Thank you for inviting me today to speak to you on the occasion of the stand that you've taken. I needn't explain to most of those people behind me that in synagogues throughout the diaspora today, Jews did recite a verse from the book of Leviticus that is a verse that virtually any American public school student knows, no matter what religious heritage or ethnic group he belongs to or she belongs to. And that verse is, "Proclaim liberty throughout the land to all the inhabitants thereof." The reason this should be a familiar verse is, of course, it's inscribed on the Liberty Bell, situated just before Independence Hall. Americans going back to the time of our founding fathers identified with this verse because they believed that people should live free of tyranny. If this is true for each and every American, this is certainly true in terms of the Jewish people, who for a good couple of thousands of years were relegated to second-class citizenship throughout the world. And finally, in the time of some of the people living today, some people in this room, saw for the first time in such a long time freedom, the ability to establish yet another commonwealth on ancestral soil. We take a look at the Jewish people returning to the land of Israel, and we ask the question in terms of virtually any other nation on earth. Where else can you find people dwelling in the same land, tilling the same soil, speaking the same language, observing the same holidays, adhering to the same commandments, and holding the same text sacred that its ancestors did some 3,000 years ago? And yet, the worldwide BDS movement would take that away from these descendants, delegitimize not a particular policy of any government in Israel, but the very existence and legitimacy of Israel itself. One may say it should be obvious that Americans of whatever religious background would understand the danger of BDS, not only for Israel, but for all freedom-loving people everywhere. One could say it would only be obvious to recognize that Israel is a beacon of democracy in an area of the world that is very often shrouded in darkness, an area that so many people are fleeing from because of the dangers that are there. Some may say that in the United States of America, it's obvious Israel is one of America's best allies in the whole world. But to tell you the truth, given the tenor of so much conversation, even among enlightened Western Europe, it gives all of us who care about the state of Israel a great sense of gratification, encouragement, and hope when we see states throughout this great country of ours understand the danger and adopt the position you have today. And so on behalf of not only the Jewish community, but freedom-loving people everywhere, I thank each and every one of you who have taken this stand, and God willing, it will be good for all mankind in the future. Thank you.
And I should have mentioned a little earlier, we're going to try to limit, each of us should try to limit statements to about 3 minutes, please. Otherwise, here a while. I understand that does the school have to leave soon, or
Yes.
you got another? Yeah, Ms. Beeman? You have a few minutes, okay. So in that case, I'd like to call Rabbi Jay Rosenbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Coppell. It's an honor to be here, not only as the spiritual leader of Temple Israel of Lawrence, the oldest synagogue in Nassau County, but also president of the North American Board of Rabbis, which serves boards of rabbis across the United States. BDS, boycott, divest, sanction. I don't think those letters mean that. To me, BDS means bad, divisive system. It's aggressive. It's against the worker. It's elitist. It's against the open exchange of ideas across national, international, religious, and ethnic lines. It promotes fear instead of fraternity. Erects walls rather than building bridges of understanding. Embraces an ideology of war rather than creating an atmosphere which promotes the welfare of all. BDS, a bad, divisive system. Anathema to the teachings of the three Abrahamic faiths, namely to treat the stranger as the homeborn, the other, the non-Jew, the non-Christian, the non-Muslim as the homeborn. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. It's against embracing. It is focused on rejecting. BDS is a contradiction to our American values and the ideals we embrace in this great hall of understanding, dialogue, and government. The ideals we embrace and cherish. and a part of the very soul of this great community of Long Island. God bless you, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank Nassau County Legislature for taking this historic step. It's the first largest county in the United States and the first to pass this legislation, and hopefully will inspire others to do the same. Specific thanks to the presiding officer, Ms. Gonzalez, and Legislator Capel, and Legislator Rhodes, who shared his office with us and gave us some nourishment while we were waiting. I want to take this opportunity also to thank the life-saving efforts of the policemen we just honored, and also Katie's inspirational activities, which shows you that just a handful of people can really make a difference, and I think that's really the theme today. We brought with us all the students in our school, Rambam Mesivta High School, because, as was mentioned, we think it's an important lesson in civics, and they are the future of our people in the United States to be leaders, and we have to teach them and inspire them to take the leadership role as this panel is doing today. Many of them may be Democrats or Republicans or conservatives or liberals, but I think they're all united in one thing, which is speaking out against this insidious effort called BDS. And as I mentioned to the media outside, to my mind, BDS stands for blackmail, dishonesty, and silence. It's predicated on all three. Blackmail in the sense that when a company such as Reebok recently tried to put together a sneaker to celebrate Israel's 68th anniversary, they were quickly bombarded with messages, according to media reports, to divest and to deny their activity, and they basically disavowed. They made a politically neutral statement. We have nothing to do with this. We don't politicize anything, even though the record shows that they have had other sneakers made politicizing and celebrating Israel and celebrating the United States or Germany or England, and it's really a shame that they're under the threat of blackmail, as are many other multinational corporations. Deep for dishonesty, because although they allege to be a human rights organization, they have not once spoken out against the horrific crimes carried out by Arab sympathizers who call themselves Palestinians that will stab a mother of 5. Not once have they spoken out against those human rights violations, or obviously the human rights violations taking place in Syria. As for silence, because we know that evil perpetrates and sprouts forth when good people are silent. And I think that's exactly the mandate we have today, that Nassau County Legislature is taking the lead in not being silent. I am the son of Holocaust survivors. My parents went through Auschwitz, death marches, the worst of everything, and unfortunately this happened because at that time the American population was silent. I commend the legislature for speaking out and really hoping to do the best in terms of stopping this insidious threat, which is not just to the state of Israel, but to Western values, our values of democracy. I'm proud to live in Nassau County. I applaud your efforts, and certainly proud to be in the United States. God bless America. Thank you.
How are you, Jim?
Throughout our nation's history, we as Americans have proven to the world and ourselves that the United States is not afraid, but rather we're eager to take the initiative and stand up for what we believe in. When the Soviets were ravaging through Asia and Europe, attempting to spread communism globally, we stepped in multiple times, attempting to put a stop to the madness and protect the democratic principles we pride ourselves on. In World War II, we fought not only to rid Europe of a tyrant and protect ourselves, but to stand up for our democratic allies whose views we share were under attack by Nazis and fascist Imperial Japan. And when we fought World War I, we did so to ensure that we could trade and communicate with our allies without both us and them having to worry about threats militarily or economically. Today, ladies and gentlemen of the legislature, we as Americans face a similar foe. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, similarly as our adversaries have in the past, seeks to end all trade and commerce by actively seeking one nation-state's destruction. And that very state, which is the target of this odious movement, is our greatest Middle Eastern ally, Israel. Israel is the one true democracy in the Middle East that offers full equality for all of its citizens, offers fair elections, and thrives on Western progressive values. By default, if a movement contradicts Israel's values, it is contradicting ours. We as Americans and as a county cannot sit idly by as our greatest ally in the Middle East is being threatened on a global scale by an organization which embodies the values of jihadist terrorists, fascists, and anti-Semites. In fact, one of the leaders of the BDS movement at Columbia University dropped out of school in order to join others who share his radical organization's views, terrorists and Hezbollah, the terrorist entity which targets Israel's civilian populations all over the country. Organizations which embody these values should not be allowed to thrive in our country, for if we harbor them, we are just as bad as they are. Our local congressional representatives feel similarly, as Congressman King and Congresswoman Rice have both co-sponsored House Bill 4514, commonly known as the Combating BDS Act of 2016. The act protects our right as a county to disassociate contracts and pensions with any entity that boycotts, divests, or sanctions Israeli goods. We've been given this amazing opportunity today as a county to end any local affiliation with BDS, and it's an opportunity we must not hesitate to take. By combating BDS as a county and being one of the first to do so in the country, we've set the precedent for every other community, county, city, and state to do the same. By setting that precedent and showing our leadership, we'd be able to, and ability to take initiative, Nassau County would finally become that city upon a hill that John Winthrop, first governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, envisioned his colony to be ever so long ago. So today, let's embody our American values on a local level to counter those who are the antithesis of democracy and all America and Israel stand for. By doing so, we will weaken the BDS movement and move one step closer to creating a climate that could lead to peaceful coexistence. On a more personal note, during World War II, as the Nazis were making their way through Europe, my grandparents lost much extended family because the world didn't act quickly enough. Therefore today, I'm here to ensure that this time around, the world won't hesitate on major issues, but rather will act with haste and zeal led by Nassau County and America, and nip this familiar anti-Semitic foe in the bud. On behalf of all my colleagues present, I'd like to sincerely thank Presiding Officer Gonzalez, along with Legislator Capel, and all the other members of the legislature for making this possible, and for letting us stand up for what we believe in and be able to take part in this very historic day. Thank you.
Joseph, are you here? Yes.
Good afternoon. I'd first like to thank the legislature for allowing myself and my peers the opportunity to speak at such a monumental event. One of the major goals of the BDS movement is recognizing the fundamental rights of the Arab-Palestinian citizens of Israel to full equality. Now, at first glance, this definitely seems like a very admirable pursuit, fighting for the rights of a seemingly oppressed people. However, one must simply take a look at the facts to realize that this movement is nothing virtuous and is in fact hugely inconsistent. An effort to grant Palestinians basic human rights is definitely admirable. However, in the Middle East, Israel will be the last place for such an effort to take place. Take Jordan, for example, where the government revokes the citizenship of thousands of Palestinians, or Lebanon, where even today, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are banned by law from working in a large number of jobs and aren't able to acquire property, social security, or even medical care. Even places like Egypt and Syria, along with several other Arab countries, continue to impose severe travel restrictions on Palestinians. This issue of Palestinian basic human rights in the Middle East is completely ignored by the BDS movement, which instead chooses to focus its efforts on the one country in the Middle East where all citizens, including Israeli Arabs who identify with the Palestinians, are treated equally under democratic rule. This double standard BDS has against Israel must be unmasked for what it truly is: anti-Semitism. Not a fight for the plight of others, not an endeavor for peace between Israelis and Palestinians. Nothing short of the destruction of the state of Israel will satisfy BDS. That is why the fight against BDS is so critical for all freedom-loving and decent people. This is a movement that specifically targets the only Jewish state. It is eerily reminiscent of the Nazi boycott against Jewish places of business and of Jewish employees. No one spoke up then, and we all know what happened. This time, we must have the courage to speak out and take clear and concrete action against this evil movement. Thank you.
please, everyone?
Those who founded BDS make no bones about it. Their objective is not to create a Palestinian state in the West Bank or in Gaza. Their stated goal is to eliminate the Jewish state altogether. As Omar Barghouti, one of the founders of BDS, has said, definitely, most definitely, we oppose a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. No Palestinian, rational Palestinian, not a sellout Palestinian, will ever accept a Jewish state in Palestine. Despite this, there are still those that say BDS is not anti-Semitic. It's merely anti-Zionist. They are against Jews, they're against Israel, but they are not against the Jews. In response to this, Charles Krauthammer put it best. Don't tell me this is merely about Zionism. The ruse is transparent. Israel is the world's only Jewish state. To apply to the state of the Jews a double standard that you apply to none other, to judge one people in a way you judge no other, to single out that one people for condemnation and isolation, to engage in a gross act of discrimination. And discrimination against Jews has a name. It's called anti-Semitism. Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz compares the way BDS opponents single out Israel for its human rights violations with the way Harvard President A. Lawrence Lowell defended his decision to impose anti-Jewish quotas in the beginning of the 20th century. When asked why there should be a quota on Jews, Lowell replied, "Jews cheat." When reminded that Christians cheat too, he responded, "You're changing the subject. We're talking about Jews now." Natan Sharansky, the famous Jewish fugitive from the former Soviet Union who went on to become a minister in the Israeli government, created a test called the 3 Gs for determining when legitimate criticism of Israel crosses the line into anti-Semitism. The first D stands for double standard, singling out Israel for criticism while ignoring the more egregious behavior of major human rights abuses in the Arab world and Muslim world and beyond. The second D stands for demonization, distorting the Jewish state's actions by means of insidious and false comparisons with the Nazis or South Africa's apartheid. The third D stands for delegitimization, when Israel's fundamental right to exist is denied alone among all nations in the world. This too is anti-Semitism. BDS fails every portion of this 3D test. It singles out Israel while ignoring terrible human rights abuses by Syria, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Hezbollah, Hamas, and even the Palestinian Authority. It compares Israel to the Nazis and to the South African apartheid when Israeli Arabs are the freest Arabs living in the Middle East. And as I explained earlier, it outright denies Israel's right to exist. As freedom-loving Americans, it is our obligation to recognize BDS for what it is. It is anti-Semitic. It promotes hatred. It singles out one group for harsh and discriminatory treatment, and does this to the only liberal, freedom-loving democracy in the Middle East, to the only country in that region of the world that truly shares American values. As an American, I find this offensive, and I believe it is our obligation to do everything we can to fight BDS. That is why I'm here to say thank you to this legislature. Thank you for standing up for American values and for doing your part to put an end to BDS.
Rabbi Klein, you still here? Yes.
Thank you. We on? Yeah, okay. I am so very grateful, as I expressed before, to every member of this legislature for taking on this very, very significant issue. I'm grateful that you have joined together to address one of the issues that this country must and should address so that America's greatest ally in the Middle East is protected from those who wish to see its destruction. Let's understand what BDS is. It is an effort to demonize Israel, to cast it as a pariah state, a state that has no legitimacy and therefore deserves to be destroyed. Those who promote BDS single out Israel. And what makes BDS so morally indefensible is that it offers and directs disproportionate hatred and vitriol against the state of Israel and disproportionate silence regarding the wrongs of so many others. The Russians, the Chinese, the Turks, the North Koreans, the Iranians, the Syrian government, the Saudis, the Palestinian Authority itself, all get a pass. BDS wants not to address any of those moral or ethical issues raised by the way in which these governments act. There is no moral high ground for BDS. No moral high ground when it looks away and ignores human rights violations committed by so many others and focuses solely upon the State of Israel. They look away at the unending tragedy of Muslim-on-Muslim violence, and they turn their glance away from Muslim on Christian crimes in the Middle East. And by the way, because of the latter, Israel has become one of the great refuge areas in the Middle East for those of Christian faith. To unjustly single out Israel for boycott and sanctions and delegitimization is an affront to any reasonable standard by which nations should be judged. And since it targets only one nation in the world, we have to see it as an expression of the oldest hatred in the world, which we call anti-Semitism. I urge that you pass this legislation. Let Nassau County stand with those who support America's greatest ally and friend. Send a message to the BDS leadership that in this county, their lies and their distortions and their hatred for the State of Israel will today be repudiated. Thank you very much.
Mr. Greenberg?
My name is Ken Greenberg, and I'm the Long Island Regional President of the American Jewish Committee. AJC is one of the oldest and most significant Jewish organizations in the United States, with 22 offices in the U.S. and 10 offices overseas. I'd like to thank the legislators of Nassau County for allowing me to say a few words in support of Nassau County's new legislation, precluding the county from entering into business contracts with companies and individuals participating in the BDS movement against Israel. The goal of the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, is not a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. BDS is an international effort to stigmatize, isolate, and ultimately delegitimize Israel. On Long Island, the BDS movement has fostered a climate of hostility toward Jewish and non-Jewish allies of Israel in our colleges and in the private sector. What makes the BDS movement's accusations against Israel particularly heinous is that Israel has maintained a system of parliamentary electoral democracy since its inception in 1948. While human rights atrocities occur daily in other countries in the Middle Eastern region, Israel is a liberal democracy that protects the rights of religious minorities, women, and the LGBT community. Israel and its diverse population have flourished. Israel has built a climate of respect for many faith groups, including Baha'is, Christians, and Muslims, and fully safeguards their places of worship. No other nation in the region can make that claim. This legislation is a declaration that Nassau County will not allow itself to conduct, nor its conduct of business, to be held hostage to political falsehoods against America's strongest ally in the Middle East. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Noam Gilmore, and I come before you today representing the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York and more than 60 local Jewish organizations in New York City, Westchester, and of course Long Island. I'm here to speak in favor of passing the proposed local law, and I want to specifically thank Presiding Officer Norma Gonsalves and Legislator Howard J. Capel, whose efforts have been instrumental in bringing this bill before us today. I'd also like to thank the entire legislature and both sides of the aisle for your time today. As we're all aware, this bill concerns supporting the U.S.-Israel relationships, which isn't just a Democratic issue or a Republican issue, it's an American issue, and one which we must all work to protect, as successive administrations have shown us. Over the last decade, the State of Israel has been a victim of economic warfare in the form of a well-orchestrated and well-funded campaign to delegitimize the world's only Jewish and democratic state. Activists from all around the world, even here in America, have sought to cripple Israel through BDS campaigns, which are boycotts of Israeli products, divestment from Israeli companies and American companies doing business and in Israel, and to implement a global sanctions regime upon Israel. But why is Israel targeted? The propaganda spewed by such activists claims that the purpose of the BDS movement is to pressure Israel into ending its occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. However, as has been stated before, a further examination of the stated goals of the BDS movement shows that BDS isn't interested in simply providing the Palestinians with an independent state alongside Israel, but it's actively trying to replace the Jewish state with a Palestinian state by flooding Israel proper, not the West Bank, not Gaza, with Palestinians from all over the world. 71 years ago, the world woke up and understood the need for a Jewish state. The need for my people to be in control of their own destiny. And over the years, massive armies, Arab League boycotts, and Palestinian terrorism have been used to try and bring the Jewish state to its knees. But all have failed. As we say in our culture, Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people, the people of Israel, we live. Now in an era when the last survivors of Hitler's Holocaust are passing away, malevolent individuals are seeking to deprive my people of that same right, the right to self-determination, while vigorously supporting that same right for the Palestinian people. It doesn't take a PhD to see that this is most certainly anti-Semitic. We, as allies of Israel, must not permit those who seek to promote BDS and the dissolution of Israel to go about their business as usual in America. The goal of peace in the Middle East depends on both Israelis and Palestinians working together with international support toward the mutual goal of a negotiated two-state solution, which would see a Jewish and democratic Israel side by side in peace and security with an independent Palestinian state. Many Americans, individual Israelis, successive Israeli governments, and even the Palestinian Authority have supported this goal. In contrast, BDS presents a distorted caricature of the conflict, which does no justice for any of the parties. Its tactics are one-sided and are focused solely on pressuring Israel, thus creating a distorted picture of the region. Rather than focusing on improving the situation for both peoples, BDS activists undermine the internationally backed peace process that is premised on the development of creating mutual understanding and respect between the parties. Economic boycotts and divestment actions will not help the Palestinian people. The path to peace depends on creating an atmosphere of mutual understanding and reconciliation, combined with economic development and political achievement. In the way of this stands the BDS movement. I urge you all on both sides of the aisle to support this bill. If you believe in the right of the Jewish people to safety and security in their own national homeland, I urge you to vote for this bill. If you believe in the right of the Palestinian people to their own state alongside, but not instead of Israel, I urge you to vote for this bill. If you oppose divisive, destructive tactics that attempt to cripple Israel and move away from a true peace process, I urge you to vote for this bill. Passing this bill will make a clear statement, the first in New York State, that in Nassau County we will not do business with those who seek to harm Israel. I'm on my last line. Ladies and gentlemen, resolutions supporting Israel and the peace process send wonderful messages to the American Jewish community and to the Israeli public that America stands with Israel, but actions speak louder than words. We have an opportunity here to take advantage of to demonstrate the everlasting bonds between the United States and Israel, and I hope we will take it. Thank you for your time.